you have been commenting on all of the changes that have occurred since the beginning, since the beginning of the special military operation, February 2022. Where do you think it's going to end, in your opinion? Because it seems like there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of, I don't know, from the collective West, especially incoherency. And then on the Russian side, it seems like kind of full steam ahead, full steam ahead, just doing what they're doing. So where do you think this is going to take the world, all the players involved?
The only serious answer to your question, Danny, lies with the Russian general staff. And that's what everything that is being discussed anywhere, even here, even in Moscow, is speculation. So who knows? Putin, Patrushev, probably at the Security Council, General Gerasimov, General Surovikin, and that's it. Maybe a very small circle of 4 or 5 players. These are the only ones who really know where this is going. What we do know is that they're not in a hurry, number one. Number two, what they managed to accomplish in Bakhmut, Artemyevsk, these past, let's say, 2 months or so, I would say it's a microcosm of what could happen from now on, which is basically, in military terms, the snail technique. They are very slow. They are advancing, conquering territory. No, it's okay. We wait, and we go little by little with minimum collateral damage for our troops and for our equipment. And at the same time, the mincing machine approach, which is exactly what they have been doing in Bakhmut, Artemovsk. And the losses of the Ukrainian armed forces are absolutely staggering. You know, it's at least 30,000, if not more. According to Prigozhin, the head of Wagner, 1 or 2 days ago, he mentioned 30,000 dead, at least, which means, okay, if you count the wounded, it's another Ukrainian army that is dead on top of the first 3 ones. You know, this is the 4th dead Ukrainian army, you know, in a year or so. So they're going to continue with the same approach. Basically, what are they doing now with the counteroffensive? They're waiting. Okay, they're going to launch a counteroffensive. NATO date. They have enough weapons. They have enough a new army. Okay, all right, bring it on. They are waiting. They are fortified. They built extra fortifications in the Crimean border. And of course, what they have behind is even more lethal. And people can imagine how lethal it is, because it has not been applied in the battleground yet. Not to mention all the hypersonic hardware that they can reserve for pinpointed strategic strikes, such as the one that was not, this is very, very important, was not officially admitted by the Russian general staff, was not officially admitted by the Pentagon, was not officially admitted by NATO, but everybody knows that happened, was the King's-All strike against a NATO command and control center near Lviv that killed over 200, including 40 or 50 top NATO officers. That was that message spooked NATO to hell. And that's one of the unstated, invisible reasons for, look, let's do this counteroffensive now, you know. And it is a let's throw the dice. Washington knows it. Brussels knows it. NATO knows it. And then after that, what do? They're already studying, okay, exit scenarios. And obviously throwing Zelensky under the bus. This is something that each day that passes, this possibility becomes clearer and clearer. So from the Russian point of view, and this is discussed by the best Russian military analysts here. And if you go to the best military channels of Telegram, of correspondents on the ground, some of them extremely critical of the Russian Ministry of Defense. So it's very, very enlightening, especially for us foreigners, to read the Russian military criticism of their own military, which is something that you don't have in the West, you know. And here the conversation is very, very lively. But now basically most of them are saying, look, there is a serious danger of a counteroffensive against Crimea. They have a chance, even if it's a 1 to 10 chance, but they have a chance of, provoking something really serious. At the same time, the preparations are very, very serious as well. So this counteroffensive could be repelled with not too much damage for Russia. But they are taking very seriously that this is the last throw of the dice, and NATO is going to throw everything that they have in this counteroffensive. Because if this fails, which according to the best military analysts, including American analysts, including Larry Johnson, including Scott Ritter, including Douglas McGregor, they say it's going to fail. Martyanov, for 2 months, they say, but it's not even going to happen because they know it's going to fail. Okay, we don't know for sure. What we do know is that the Russians are ready. And then after that, they also know that this democratic administration may be so desperate after this NATO humiliation on the ground, post Bakhmut, Artemyevsk, that, okay, let's try to get some sort of ceasefire or freeze the conflict, which is something that the Russians don't want. The Russians have already spelled it out in detail. We want peace. And it's very, very simple. This guy surrenders. He recognizes all the territories that he lost. Demilitarization of Ukraine, a neutral status, neutral status for Ukraine, NATO not on Russia's borders, or they're going to be in Western Ukraine or in Poland, okay, but not in Ukraine itself. And that's it. Basically, that's it. And so they have not changed in terms of this is something that Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, he says that every day. Look, the objectives of the SMO remain the same. So if they attain that without a counteroffensive, with a counteroffensive, after a counteroffensive, or next year, it's the same thing for them because they know exactly what they want.
Yeah. No, all very good points. And maybe to follow up real quick, Pepe,
Okay.
before we move on.
Okay.
The significance, I feel, of this coming failure, because it feels like this is not whatever happens in the next several months, 6 months, however long things are going to continue on in this trajectory, this pathway for the collective West. It seems like the coming failure is so much grander than even just Ukraine, right? Not being able to achieve what they'd want in Ukraine, which is regime change for Russia. I mean, I think that was always the overall objective. But that's out of the question. But there seems to be a whole lot more dominoes, things that you've been speaking about for years, just accelerating. What de-dollarization, multipolarity, all these elements seem to be accelerating in part because of what Ukraine is teaching the rest of the world about. Well, maybe we can't just sit on our hands and allow the collective West, allow the United States-led collective West to do what it's doing. I mean, what are your impressions of that?
Oh, absolutely. I've been following the story for years, absolutely. And since the beginning of the SMO, and especially after some conversations with Glaziev and with Michael Hudson. By the way, your interview with Michael Hudson, Danny, wow. That was a classic. Questions and answers. Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm finishing Michael's book, and I want to write... It's not a review, but it's an extended commentary on his book, which is something absolutely extraordinary, and with some answers that he sent me by email as well. So Michael is one of the few in the West who understood from the beginning what this could lead to. In terms, of course, in terms of a radical change in international financial system away from fire, as Michael described it. Yeah? The advent of a new currency based on commodities, gold or both, de-dollarization all over the global South, in fact, which is something that is become. And I like what you put in your headline. Multipolar world in revolt is pretty much what's going on, because you see not only Saudi Arabia and Western Africa, but parts of Latin America, Southeast. Can you imagine Southeast? I lived in Southeast Asia for decades. Can you imagine Southeast Asia? They're actually discussing, okay, we're gonna, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia. Let's use our own currencies and bypass the dollar. Absolutely, it's so obvious, especially in a very large trade environment across Southeast Asia, very dynamic economies everywhere, and their main partner, the main partner of all of them, of the all ASEAN 10, is China. So why the hell are you using dollar to trade with, Laos and China, or Indonesia and China? Okay, so it is a multipolar world in revolt. The difference compared to the past, even the recent past, is that you have a bunch of multilateral organizations that can pull that off if they work together. And then we come back to the beginning of our conversation. Eurasia Economic Union, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS Plus, they will have to sit down on the same table. And it helps that most big players in all these organizations are our usual suspects: Russia, China, India, Iran, soon Saudi Arabia, and OPEC Plus, and Saudi Arabia as well. So this 180-degree change from Saudi Arabia, this is as big as it gets. Even though we still, the Holy Grail is not there, but is approaching fast. When we're going to have the petro yuan. All of us who have been following the story for years, and everybody in the U.S. financial markets for years have been saying, the day the petro yuan arrives, that's it. That's the end of the empire. For obvious reasons. We don't need. Michael could write 10 books about that, right? The thing is, we're getting there closer and closer, and the Chinese know it. They're not in a hurry because they know they're getting there. The Saudis know it. What the Saudis want to improve is their geopolitical stature as much as their geoeconomic stature, which is already assured by OPEC Plus and the fact that they are major suppliers to Asia. And they also need protection. So the protection is not from the gangsters in America anymore. The protection will have to come from Russia and China. So MBS is a very, very clever guy. Many of us had extreme reservations against MBS in the past, of course, and many of us wrote scathing things about MBS. But he had a road to Damascus moment as well. There's no question about that.
Almost literally, yeah.
Most literally, Danny. And I had confirmation from a very good Persian Gulf source. I cannot, for obvious reasons, I have to keep it in the background. But this source has direct access to MBS. And he said, look, he doesn't care about the West anymore, and that's for sure. You know what he wants? He wants Saudi girls to go to the disco, to use makeup, to drive their cars, to go on TikTok, to travel around the world, etc. And he wants to turn Saudi Arabia into a sort of mega Dubai, an enormous, money laundering machine, of course, but basically a huge resort, tourism hub, and entertainment for everybody, lots of fun. Let's bring footballers, rappers, Instagrammers, whatever. That's it. So it's a new 21st century Saudi Arabia. And why he wants to do that? Because he knows that then he's going to open up a completely new geoeconomic road, and he will sideline those old Salafi, Jihadi, Wahhabi clerics, which were part of the old Saudi Arabia. And he's also going to sideline conservative members of his family who are still supported by the CIA and by the Americans. So that's it. So then he can make his transition from being, a vassal of the American mafia to have at least enjoy protection from the background. If anything happens to you, we, Russia and China, we got your back. So this is a very, very clever geopolitical game. There's no question about that. And when you get confirmation by people who have direct access to him, and they say, that's it, and he's not turning back. And he knows this is popular. You know why? This is something maybe many of you don't know. MBS is pop star idol in Saudi Arabia. The new generation, they love him. You know, it's like he's a sort of a neo Mick Jagger in Saudi Arabia, you know. So there is this element of vanity, and I'm going to pull it off. You know, I'm going to put Saudi Arabia in the 22nd century. You know, it's going to be because of me. Of course, he's an extreme narcissist as well. So this all plays together. And the Chinese, of course, once again, who pulled that off to get the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia and Iran together in Beijing? You know, handshake, and that's it. The whole thing starts now. It's fascinating. And who started that? This is something I wrote in one of my columns. Who started this approximation? The Russians. The Russians started with secret meetings in Baghdad and in Qatar. They transferred the ball to the Chinese. The Chinese picked it up. They refined the past few months, and they clinched the deal in Beijing. There you go. So this is how you do diplomacy nowadays, Danny and everybody, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an incredible change because you have the Iran-Saudi Arabia agreement brokered in China. Then you have Saudi Arabia and Syria meeting with Russia brokering that. And it seems very close to a similar kind of situation, which would be huge given Saudi Arabia's role in that proxy war over many years. And now Yemen. I mean, it's a less direct, I think, to the naked eye, right? But Yemen now, we have Saudi Arabia. They've just released a slew of Houthi prisoners.
Prisoners. Can you imagine that? Like 2 months? Can you imagine 1 month ago? Imagine this could happen.
No, and this peace agreement is coming sometime, probably this week. And so I mean, you have like Democrats during the elections kind of pandering to peace, you know, and kind of anti-Saudi sentiment in America, but all of Washington has been all in on the war in Yemen since 2014. I mean, all of this feels like a complete shift from Saudi Arabia, and I can't imagine that Washington is too happy about it. Is this the end of the global war on terror and U.S. hegemony as we know it? I mean, that's kind of how it feels when you have a country like Saudi Arabia making these changes. What's your take?
The global war of terror is over now. Wow. From a personal point of view, I could never imagine that I would live to see it, because I covered the global war on terror from the beginning, even before. I was in Afghanistan 1 month before 9/11. Then I went back to Pakistan, the trouble areas in Afghanistan, and I kept covering the whole thing: Iraq, Syria, you know, the threats against Iran during Rumsfeld, the whole thing. And we saw that they would never end. At the time, we thought that this thing would last the rest of the 21st century. Look what happened. And the most fascinating aspect, maybe, is that the Americans inflicted on themselves. Maybe there are many dates that when was the beginning of the end? I would say for the moment, and I would like to have input from everybody everywhere. I think the date is when they froze the Russian foreign reserves in the West over $300 billion, and they saw they could get away with it. This was the message for the whole global South. If it can happen to a nuclear superpower, it could happen to any one of you. And the global South understood it perfectly. And that I would say is the number one issue on underlining everything that is happening now at breakneck speed, right?